to the Cinderella Circle, and yes, the woods. The Cinderella Circle all started here, right by this tree, as a matter of fact. I was perched on that rock over there. And today, I must tell you that the Cinderella Circle will conclude, for now, today, at this exact same location. I started the Cinderella Circle because I wanted to share that this fairy tale was about more than just a magical transformation and marrying a prince. I wanted to share that this was about overcoming grief, about human rights, about metamorphosis in our life and changing life circumstances. And I hope I've done that. But I know I also get off topic a lot. And mostly, I've just shared a bunch of different Cinderella versions with you. And so, today, we will conclude the Cinderella Circle with the 2015 remake of the original Cinderella, Disney style. Oh, the sun has come out to play. So, Cinderella 2015. This one is the reimagining, the live action reimagining of the original Disney Cinderella from 1950. So we have a 65-year difference here. And it gives a lot of homages, not just to the Disney version, but to original versions as well. So this one starts off with some bluebirds and some narration, and we actually get to see Cinderella as a baby Ella, with her parents cooing over her in the bassinet, and the happy family image. We don't get to see that. Never. I can't think of another Cinderella that offers representation of her mother, so this was really lovely. And her mother is, of course, gorgeous with a smile from ear to ear. But unfortunately, her mother's role in this film is brief because she gets the foreshadowing cough after presenting the message of have courage and be kind. And that is the resounding message throughout the entire film. Her mother also encourages the talking of the animals. Here we get a salute to Gus Gus, and Jacques becomes Jacqueline, but they're there. So, hello old movie, I see you getting referenced. Her father is there. He brings her the gift of un papillon. It's a paper butterfly, and the butterflies will be seen throughout the film. Because remember, Cinderella is about metamorphosis, transformation. So we see the happy beginning of her life. And it's a reminder that Cinderella's life is not all about service. She had a happy childhood before her mother passes on. Then her father chooses to remarry, and in this film we see him ask Cinderella, essentially for permission, and Cinderella gives the permission. Stop calling her Cinderella. She's called Ella in this film. Ella gives her permission. She loves her father. She wants him to be happy. There's a song woven throughout the narrative, Lavender's Blue, which is an old English folk song, hundreds of years old as a matter of fact, that her mother sings to her as a child, and throughout the film, it's the song that she holds on to. Is this version a musical? No. But is there music? Yes. The gorgeous and stunning Cate Blanchett makes her way onto the scene as Lady Tremaine in the most stunning silhouettes. My God, the costumes for this woman. Oh, yes, they make me swoon. And so she brings partying to the house, as well as criticism, backhanded compliments, or negging as it's commonly known. She brings her stepdaughters who only know how to mock and degrade things. Now, of course, her father was hoping this marriage would make him happy, but he finds he's very unhappy, and instead he puts all of his time back into work, and he's constantly leaving the house. And so, before he leaves, he asks Ella what she would like. The sisters have asked for lace and jewelry. She asks for the first branch to strike his shoulders, which is a nod to the Grimm's version, when she buries the branch and it grows into the tree with her tears. They didn't keep that part. But it was nice to see them reference the source material. So they're talking about how they miss the mother and how keeping the house alive and keeping the decorations keeps the mother alive. And who overhears this but Lady Tremaine? And this breaks her heart because she didn't hear anything good about herself. She just heard that she's troublesome, misunderstood, and unhappy. That's when she makes the decision It's time to make Ella unhappy. So upon the father leaving, the emotional manipulation begins. It starts through the power of suggestion. Lady Tremaine suggests that the stepdaughters are terribly unhappy with their room and prompts Ella to offer up her room. Lady Tremaine insinuates that the stepsisters are unhappy with their living quarters, and Ella, being so kind and generous, offers her bedroom. Lady Tremaine jumps on the opportunity and suggests that Ella should live in the attic, away from all of their trouble. And so the strife begins. Now, Ella makes good of it at first. She is surprised by how drafty it is in the attic, but she finds her animal friends living there. She makes do with it. There's another nod to the original film when we hear her singing, "Sing, sweet nightingale," as she frolics around doing daily chores and gathering eggs and helping other servants in her house. Because she does have other servants, until they get news that the father passed while he was on the road. The last thing he brings is that branch that Ella had asked for. And then it really continues. The stepmother dismisses the staff, and all of the housework is left to Ella. Doing all of this housework distracts her from her grief, but not really, because now she's overworked and exhausted and starving. All the while, the stepmother increasingly bullies her, laughs in her face, dismisses her needs. There's only so much a person can take. The final straw is when the narrator shares that it's too cold in the attic, so she sleeps by the fire, where she gets covered with ashes, and thus the nickname Cinderella is born. But that's not her breaking point. Her breaking point is when she sets a place for herself at the table, and the stepmother laughs in her face, asks, wouldn't she rather eat after all the work is done? And it's an ugly laugh. That dismissal, that bah! Bah! It's so good. Cate Blanchett is amazing. Ella, Cinderella, is of course played by Lily James, who really brings that ethereal quality to Cinderella. Now, the grief has compounded with just this constant emotional abuse. And remember, that is the insidiousness of Cinderella. It's not just that they are overworking and starving this girl, although that is bad enough, but it's also that there is no type of emotional support. Emotional abuse can only be stopped if we call it out when we see it. And these are tactics that people use day to day throughout life. You hear those sirens? That's because it's a red flag, baby. So she goes charging out in the woods on a horse, like riding bareback. You go, Ella. You got some strong thighs. Yes, our Ella has some very powerful thighs. She's holding onto that horse, her hands buried in its mane. It's charging wildly through the woods, and that's when she has the encounter with a stag. Now, there's a difference between a stag and a buck. A stag is a male deer. A buck is a male deer, but a stag is physically tremendous. And a buck can be either immature or mature, but it's generally smaller. Either way, to encounter such an animal fills her with awe, and she forgets her grief. It's a powerful moment, this animal encounter. And I mean, every time I encounter a deer, I am struck with awe. I encountered a deer recently, and it was incredible. Take a look. Doesn't that just fill you with wonder? So now her mood is changed, and she hears the royal guards are hunting. An entire royal hunting party looking for the stag. And so she cries out, "Go, run, I'll hold them off." The stag takes off, which makes her horse bolt, and now she's charging through the forest once again. And the sight of a maiden on a galloping horse catches the prince's attention, and so he goes after her to see, does she need help? Is she in danger? And this is where she and the prince meet, not at the ball, but in the wilderness. And they have a flirtation, an exchange. They talk about how she let the stag go, and he's quite taken with her. And it's happening in this circular moment. The horses are circling each other, they're sizing each other up. He misrepresents himself not as the prince, but as an apprentice. And she seeks after his welfare. She asks, do they treat you well? Because of course what she's saying is, I'm abused, I'm exhausted, please tell me that your people don't do the same thing to you. I'm sure this is quite unusual for the prince. No one asks him if people treat him well. He is the prince. You best be treating him well. But what a way to touch the heart. And touch the heart she does. And then she's off, he's off, and then we meet the king and the archduke. There's also a fun recreation of that painting scene that originally existed in the animation. We get that painting scene. The king discusses the importance of him marrying for the good of the kingdom, to accrue army and wealth and strength, for they are a small nation. And he talks about the significance of meeting this stranger in the woods and how taken he is with her, which prompts the idea. Every maiden shall be invited to this ball that his father is insisting that he throws to find a bride. When the announcement is made, Ella makes the mistake of thanking the stepmother for thinking they included her when they asked for 3 ball gowns to be run up, which of course they were talking about themselves. So they recreate the dressmaking scene, but instead of the mice and the birds sewing the dress, they were going for a more realistic approach. We get Cinderella stitching up her mother's dress herself, coming down to present, promising that it cost them nothing. But this will not do. Oh no, Lady Tremaine is aghast when she sees the enchanting Ella on the stairs. And in fact, she participates in the destruction of the dress, being the first to tear a sleeve, which is different from the original animated film, in which she simply uses the power of suggestion to get the stepdaughters, Anastasia and Drizella, to do the tearing and the ripping. So in this one, there's a lot of vehemence in the stepmother that is active, not just passive. They leave, Cinderella cries, recreating the scene in the garden, the giving up, the I cannot go on any longer. And now we have our fairy godmother entering the scene, played by Helena Bonham Carter, in what is definitely a real tonal shift, because before it was sentimental, it was whimsical, it was magical, and then it becomes very goofy. Helena Bonham Carter first appears as the hag, and the hag is a representation of a wizened old woman, generally an enchantress hiding herself and her beauty and her magic to test whether the people she comes across are worthy of her magic. Cinderella, of course, passes the test with her kindness, and then with a swish and a flick that is really quite cool, she transforms. But she transforms into a fairy godmother who doesn't seem to have much confidence in her own power. When it comes to changing the pumpkin into a vehicle, she's like, I've never tried pumpkins. As well as the fact that she decides to transform the pumpkin inside the solarium. So that means as it grows, they almost get squished and crushed to death, and it explodes the darn greenhouse. So that was a choice. I'm sure they thought it was cute, but Now, of course, this is Disney, and they spared no expense for that magical transformation sequence, and what a transformation sequence it is. She is enthralled through the magic, swishing around in ecstasy as her mother's dress is transformed around her into the digitally enhanced cerulean blue ball gown. They went real hard on that blue. I saw images of the before and after, and the gown is stunning with or without help. But, I mean, that color is quite eye-catching. Also, this dress is apparently 12 layers deep. It is tightly corseted, and it has a ruffle across the shoulders that is bedecked with butterflies, the symbol of metamorphosis. It's a stunning gown. It did not need the butterflies. However, the butterflies are a symbol, and they're gonna roll with it. Therefore, so shall we. The shoes. Swarovski crystal. They're physical, they're real. No human woman can wear them, but they made a real glass slipper, and it is It is the glass slipper to end all glass slippers, because before they were either ugly or digitally made. For example, the most recent Cinderella has gorgeous glass slippers, but they're entirely digital shoes. The Swarovski shoes, they can be held. Stunning creations. And with that, we're off. Cinderella gets her warning. Midnight, the magic will run out, and then to the ball, where we see it's quite formal, it's diplomatic, and the Archduke makes it known that he has promised the prince off to the Spanish princess already. So the Archduke is up to no good. He is manipulating the scenes. Well, manipulating from behind the scenes. When Cinderella makes her grand entrance, first she must climb 3 to 5 flights of stairs, craziness, but always you make a statement when you enter. That's part of the Cinderella tale. The room is spellbound when she comes in. This is when she finds out that the apprentice is in fact the prince. They continue their banter. He dances with her and leads her off into a secret garden, and suddenly we're in another fairy tale. It's a magical evening. And for the first time, because he's pushing her on the swing, the shoe rolls off. So he actually sees it and holds it, puts it back on her foot before she even runs away. This is all new. This is all this version's version. This moment belongs exclusively to the 2015 retelling, and it's beautiful. It's magical. They did a great job in creating this intimate moment of beauty and connection. And of course, it makes the prince question, like, who are you? Who is this magical woman who just appeared out of nowhere? And on that note, the clock strikes 12 and she's got to go. Now, it's interesting. The clock strikes 12. Cinderella somehow makes it out of the secret garden, through the ballroom, stops to talk to the father and share how much the prince genuinely loves him, and bolts down 3 to 5 flights of stairs before losing her shoe, all during those 12 strokes of midnight. She is a bionic woman, the quickest Cinderella, super Cinderella. Those shoes have gifts of flight. That's why they've got butterfly wings on them, because she's literally flying across town. And much like in the original version, it's the Archduke and the horses who chase her, not the prince. Here's another horror sequence. With everything transforming around her, she's trapped in the pumpkin as it's shrinking. I mean, it's Disney. They spared no expense. There's pumpkin seeds bedecking the walls of the pumpkin as it shrinks around her. She only escapes because it smashes into a rock. That could have been it. That could have been the end of Cinderella. Thankfully, it wasn't. And she walks home carrying everyone in the glass slipper, the only remaining magic. And it takes her all night to get home, because the moment she gets home, she hears the stepfamily return. While at the ball, the stepmother overhears the Duke talking about the prince being promised off already. And she's suspicious of Cinderella, who has just buried the shoe in the ashes of the fireplace, the first place she could find. But she takes notice of how dreamy Cinderella appears to be when last she had left her, destroyed and torn and tattered and sad. Then we move on to the following day, in which the king is dying. And then he dies. And that's also something exclusive to this version. We don't see the king passing. But here he does, and so the prince must become a man. This also implies a lot of time passes between the ball and him finding Cinderella, because they mention an appropriate time of mourning, which generally in the past was a minimum of 1 year. So, all right. And after that time of mourning comes to pass, the prince makes an announcement that he is indeed going after the dream girl, and insists that she presents herself. So Cinderella hears the news, she runs home to get the shoe, but who has found it? Of course, Lady Tremaine. And she gets this reprimand of marrying for love and how it brings nothing, and her bitterness really comes out. She destroys the shoe, locks Cinderella in the attic, which is also what happens in the animated version. But this time, she goes to the Archduke for blackmail, for the sake of getting what she wants. So, Lady Tremaine colluding with the Archduke, that's new. She brings the broken heel as physical evidence and promises they'll get rid of her as long as she gets what she wants. She wants to be a duchess. She wants advantageous marriages for her daughters. let it be done. And they'll get rid of Cinderella so that the prince will marry the Spanish princess. So then we get the shoe sequence in which the Archduke is trying it on every single maiden. You get some gags, you get some goofs. But when they make it to Lady Tremaine's, which is the final estate at the very end of the property, at the very edge of the kingdom, Cinderella is singing in the attic that Lavender's Blue song, and the mice conspire to help her be found because no one knows she's in there. So with the help of each other, they get the window open and her voice drifts down melodically to all the king's horses and all the king's men. And the Archduke tries to get out of there. Wouldn't you know it, the prince was hiding amongst his men all along because he suspected the Archduke was up to no good. And thus they go upstairs. Cinderella is brought to him. And this is also a moment that only exists in this version, where Cinderella presents herself. She has the shoe. She confesses, yes, it was me, but will you take me as I am? I'm not a princess, I'm a commoner. And the prince shares her sentiments. Will you take me as I am? A nobleman, a royal, someone in need of a great support system who wants her to be his wife, to be his companion in this unknowing and mysterious world. So there was a lot of compassion between this couple. They have a genuine connection. They talked. Their spirits were compatible. And then you get the sweeping vistas. I mean, this version is visually stunning. It is gorgeous, beautiful to look at. We get a new gown, which is her wedding gown, with a princess cut sheer sleeve corset top, white gown with all of these pastel flowers bedecking the train and the veil. Another gorgeous, iconic dress. And it ends with the fairy godmother admitting that she's the one who was narrating all along. The stepmother ends up leaving the kingdom with the Archduke. I guess they're exiled now. And then they live happily ever after, which really just means making the most of your life, making the most of your circumstances. It doesn't mean there won't be tough times, but it's about how you approach them. Have courage and be kind was an excellent sentiment for a Cinderella tale. It's my personal opinion that this version was the best out of all of the live action remakes that Disney's been churning out, because it referenced the source material and gave us new things to admire. So, her parents are gone. She is pressed into service. She is grieving. It's not a musical. She gets her transformation sequence. She has her connections to nature, being friends with the animals, having that moment with the stag, which leads her to meet the prince. That leap of faith of going to the ball, presenting herself at the end. I mean, this version is beautiful. And I say that a lot. But that's because beauty exists in so many different ways. So what do you think? Do you guys like this version? Do you dislike this version? It's not everyone's cup of tea, but then again, neither is Cinderella. Well, folks, I hope that we all continue to live happily ever after. This concludes the Cinderella Circle. I have been your host, Danielle, Marivette, Hernandez, and I've loved bringing to you all these different versions of Cinderella. When I started this, it was about March, the start of spring, and now it is September, the start of fall. Change is upon us, and so it's time to change what we're talking about here. I hope I've helped you see how Cinderella is more than just a fairy tale. It's about the human condition. It's about overcoming grief and loss. It's about allowing ourselves to change, to metamorphosize, to rise from the ashes of our old lives by taking those leaps of faith and lining up with people who are compatible to us, who want the best for us, and yes, to potentially finding romantic partnership. It's about looking at all the forms of abuse that exist. Yes, there is physical abuse, there is man labor. The original Cinderella is a slave story, and it's difficult, it's touchy to say that, especially as an American, where we have and an insidious history of slavery and racism and black culture and African Americans being stolen from their native lands, brought here and treated abominably. This tale originates before any of that happened. To be enslaved is not exclusively a racial thing. But I just want to clarify that I don't want to make a tone-deaf statement when I say the original Cinderella is an enslaved woman finding her freedom. But that is what it is. It has changed and grown and metamorphosized. Our Cinderellas have changed names and changed locations, changed circumstances. Some of them quietly persevere. Others of them are spicy and put up a fight. Some of them are entrepreneurs. But all of these women have the same things in common. They lose their loved ones. They are pressed into a time of difficult physical labor and isolation. They lose hope. But through the gift of prayer and magic, they take a leap of faith. They have a transformation, and they are able to grow their lives into something infinitely better than they ever could have possibly imagined. So thank you for joining me and the Cinderella Circle. That's all for now. I know there are more versions of Cinderella that we didn't touch upon, and there will always be more versions of Cinderella. But I hope the ones that I've brought to your attention have expanded your awareness to what the Cinderella tale can be and is. Now I must go before the clock strikes midnight and I get trapped in a pumpkin. I'll see you guys real soon. Have courage and be kind.